Hello, welcome to BookSpin. It's time for a book review trio. So I'm going to look back on the past three science fiction novels that I've read, and we're going to start off with Gateway by Frederik Pohl, published in 1977. So this is one book that I've had on my bookshelf for years, but for some reason I never got around to reading it until now. I finally decided to pick it up after joining a group buddy read on another channel's Discord. And this book has quite a classic status in 1970s science fiction. It's won numerous awards, including the Hugo and the Nebula. So I had pretty high hopes for it. It's certainly got a lot going for it. It's got a very intriguing premise. There's some really interesting sci-fi concepts. And the story is quite entertaining. But for me, it was ultimately let down because the main character is so unlikable, and this kind of got in the way of my reading enjoyment. I'll talk about that in a minute, but before I do, I think it's worth spending some time talking about the premise because it is really interesting. So this story takes place in a sort of dystopian future in which life on Earth has kind of gone down the pan somewhat. Humans have achieved a degree of space colonization. We've set up settlements on Venus, for example. But this isn't the actual focus of the story. So the story in Gateway takes place on a space station, which is called Gateway. And this is a space station which it's not been created by humans, it's been discovered by humans. And humans have now settled on it. And I say discovered because it was the product of an alien civilization, a mysterious ancient alien culture known as the Hichi. Okay, and we don't know much about the Hichi. So it's quite mysterious. But anyway, they built this space station which we call Gateway. And they built it out of a hollowed out asteroid in our solar system at some point in the distant past, and it's been long abandoned. And now it's being co-opted for human purposes. And this is because Gateway has some very useful things for humanity. It is home to some astounding technological relics left behind by the Hichi that are of immense value. So there are in fact thousands of ancient spaceships still in working order on Gateway, and these go far beyond the limits of human technology, and they're capable of travelling faster than light. They're pretty small, these spaceships, the largest of which can only hold 5 people. And no one seems to understand how they work. But we can still ride them, we can still use them. And in terms of operation, they travel on pre-programmed routes. So these were routes which were set by their creators long ago. So humans don't really have any control over their navigation. You just hop in, you press a button and see where the ship takes you. It's a bit crazy, really. It's a very risky enterprise, but there is motivation for going on these trips. There are potentially very great rewards for those brave enough to give it a try. Some of these pre-programmed voyages lead the crew to destinations where valuable Hichi artifacts and relics are located, which can be taken back to Gateway and sold for a great bounty. So this whole business of prospecting builds around these starships, in which travellers hope to get lucky and become wealthy by embarking on one of these vessels. But the risks are extremely high. There are a lot of hazards out there in space, not least of which is the possibility that you won't even reach your destination before you run out of food, which sounds ridiculous, But the thing is, no one knows how long each of these voyages is going to take. It could take a very long time, and the Gateway Corporation can only supply a limited amount of food and supplies for each passenger in their trip, and they have no real idea if this is actually going to be adequate for the whole journey. So you could just starve to death. But there are plenty of other risks besides, terrifying risks, which come with space travel and all the dangers that might involve. And even if you do survive the experience, there's still a good chance that your mission will be futile and you won't find anything. You won't find any artifacts at all on your journey. So it's a very risky venture. It's the ultimate game of Russian roulette. But there are plenty of desperate people out there who are drawn to Gateway with the promise of a better life if their mission is successful. So that's the backdrop to this story. The world building, it's a very intriguing concept, a lot of potential there, and I do like this idea, but we don't actually get a lot of narrative focus on these missions per se throughout this book. Most of the story takes place on the space station Gateway itself, in which we follow a first-person point of view protagonist called Bob Broadhead. Now, this for me, this is where the story is, or the writing is let down, because I found his character very difficult to like or to sympathize with. And most of the book, he's basically just stuck on the space station, and he's constantly putting off or delaying making a decision to go on a space mission. So there's a lot of procrastination in this book. Not a lot happens until fairly late on in the book, and this is interspersed with chapters of him engaging with his psychotherapist, which is an AI psychotherapist, and he's constantly arguing with him. And for me, this quickly becomes tedious. These chapters feel quite repetitive. And Bob as a character, I think he actually becomes more obnoxious throughout the story, to the point where it just becomes frustrating to read. Now, I don't usually have a problem with passive characters in fiction. Even unlikable protagonists, necessarily. When they're done well, I don't mind that. But I just found that Bob's character was insufferable. He's extremely self-absorbed. He's constantly whining, and he's violent and abusive. He doesn't really seem to have any redeeming qualities. There are other characters in this book who I think are more interesting, more relatable, more sympathetic characters, like his girlfriend Clara, for example. But we only ever see the story from his point of view. So as a reader, you're stuck inside his head. And I just couldn't get past that. That is the book's major flaw for me. I couldn't endure Bob's character, and it got in the way of my reading enjoyment. Didn't totally ruin it. There's still quite a compelling story to enjoy. Things do start to get particularly interesting towards the end. And the central concept of Gateway, which I've already outlined, I think that is fascinating. So I'm going to say for this book, I'm going to give it 2.5 stars. That feels about right for me. As probably a bit contrarian, as a lot of people love this book. It's widely considered to be a classic. I've definitely read worse than this, but I've also read a lot better. So that's how it is for me. I'm going to leave it at that. And then the next book I read was Spin by Robert Charles Wilson. This was published in 2005. and this was one which came up in my BookSpinner. It's another book which I've been meaning to read for ages, and it's also another Hugo Award winner. It won the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 2006. I've heard a lot of good things about this book, so I was looking forward to it, and I did enjoy it, definitely. It's a very ambitious novel. It's got a very solid, character-focused story, and it takes place over quite a long period, over several decades. And this story is told against the backdrop of a very intriguing sci-fi mystery premise that has profound consequences, not just for our central character and the people around him, but for life on Earth as a whole and the future of human civilization. So it's very ambitious, and I can see why this won the Hugo. It's a very highly accomplished SF thriller, and a lot of intriguing concepts in here, and some really great character building. So yeah, this is very well done. Right from the start, the author grabs your attention. We have an instantly engaging scenario which introduces the central mystery of the story. So I will talk about that because I think it is a very interesting premise, but I won't go into any more details of describing any more of the other mysteries or concepts throughout this book, because there are a lot of surprises along the way, and I think it's best to go into this book not knowing too much about it. I think you'll enjoy it all the more. But a word of warning, if you have this edition, which I have, spare yourself the trouble of reading the blurb on the back. Don't read this long quote from the Washington Post, because it basically outlines the whole story. Well, all of the major plot points, a lot of them anyway. It reveals a lot of what I consider to be spoilers, totally unnecessarily. So, yeah. But in any case, there's a really interesting mystery. It gets introduced right at the start. It's a grand cosmic event. So we meet the central character, whose name is Tyler, as a young boy. And one night he goes out into his garden with his friends, who are called Jason and Diane, who are his neighbours that he grows up with, and he has a very close relationship with. So they're out in the garden one night. They're looking up at the sky, and suddenly the stars disappear from the sky. 1 minute they're there, the next they just flare up and vanish. And all that's left behind is a black sky. So the stars are gone. Who knows where or why or how, or if they're ever going to come back. So it's a pretty bizarre situation, but it's also quite disturbing, quite discomforting. It brings to mind the 9 billion names of God, you know, the classic Arthur C. Clarke short story. So the stars disappear, and not only that, but the moon disappears as well. So you just got this black sky, and it's a very confounding phenomenon. It's also very worrying, especially in the immediate aftermath, because people speculate, well, if all of the stars are gone, does that mean that our own sun has gone as well? Will the sun actually rise in the morning? Well, it does, we quickly discover. There's nothing to worry about there. We've still got the sun, but the stars and the moon are permanently gone from our night sky. Humanity quickly discovers that these celestial bodies are in fact still out there. They haven't just disappeared into nothing. We just can't see them anymore, because the globe has become enfolded in this vast barrier. It's a kind of electromagnetic barrier, and this is preventing us from seeing the stars and the moon and satellites out in space. But this is where things start to get really crazy, because we soon discover that within this barrier, the Earth is trapped in a time vault. And what this means is time is slowed down on Earth relative to the rest of the cosmos. And this is on a vast scale. So for every second that passes on our planet, just over 3 years elapse in the universe outside. So 1 year on Earth is equivalent to something like 100 million years on the outside, which is pretty mind-boggling. And this phenomenon becomes known as the spin. And that's the mystery, which is at the heart of the book. What is the spin? What caused it, or who caused it? How did they do it? Why did they do it? What does this mean for the future of our planet and for humanity? And what can we do about it? So it's a very ambitious in scope. And the other thing is, people are very concerned because since the universe has been speeded up, millions of times over, it's going to have implications on the natural life cycle of the sun. And what that means is the sun will approach supernova quite soon, from our point of view. Within a few decades of Earth time, the sun will reach the end of its natural life. So now we have an apocalyptic scenario and a widespread expectation that the end of the world will come soon, within a few decades at least anyway. And throughout the rest of the story, we get to see what happens from Tyler's point of view as he and his friends grow up, and the profound effect that the spin has on the course of their lives and the decisions they make, the different paths they take, and how humanity responds to the crisis. And Tyler and his friends play a very important role in this process and in this decision making. And there are a lot more really interesting sci-fi concepts that get explored along the way, which, as I said, I don't want to spoil for you. It's a very rich and rewarding narrative, and despite the epic scale of the story, it's told in a very intimate way through the small cast of characters that we follow, which for the most part is just these 3 people, right? These characters feel very fleshed out and believable. Even the supporting characters, it's almost akin to a Stephen King level of character building. So this definitely adds to the immersion of the story. It's all really good stuff. Great characters, interesting ideas. For me, this is a 4-star read. It does everything really well. It doesn't quite blow me away. There was nothing in here that was so thought-provoking that I couldn't stop thinking about it afterwards. So that's why I'm saying 4 stars and not 5 stars. And I don't really feel the need to continue the series because there are 2 sequels called Axis and Vortex. But I think this book works very well as a self-contained story. I am curious though, if anyone out there has read the sequels, is it worth it? How do they compare to Spin, the first book? Let me know your thoughts. Okay, and then the next book I read was Children of Memory by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which is the 3rd book in the Children of Time trilogy. And this is, I believe, something of a crowning achievement among Tchaikovsky's sci-fi and fantasy output, which is very prolific. And once again, this is actually another Hugo Award winner. This series recently picked up, just last year, the Hugo Award for Best Series. So, as I've come to expect with this series by now, it's got a very ambitious story and a very compelling premise. And once again, the focal point in Children of Memory is another distant planet in the far future. It's another product of terraforming. Terraforming that was instigated long ago in the distant past. And it is here that a mysterious and tragic drama unfolds that is at the heart of this story. And along the way we meet, we explore some very deep and thought-provoking ideas, such as the nature of intelligence and sentience, which is something of a recurring theme throughout the series, but I think it reaches its apex in this novel. We have so many different types of intelligence that we encounter in this story. We've got artificial intelligence, uplifted species, a parasitic alien intelligence, and uploaded consciousness. It's all here. A lot of these ideas were previously introduced already in the first 2 books, most memorably in the sentient spiders and octopuses from the first 2 books. But I think these ideas get taken to another level in Children of Memory. So, in this book we get introduced to a new starship called the Skipper. And this contains a mixed species crew who have set out to explore the cosmos and find new things, find terraformed planets, new forms of life, that kind of thing. And it's an extremely diverse crew. You've got spiders, you've got an octopus, you've got a human, you've got the ship AI called Kern, which is one of the main characters throughout the series. And you've also got a human-alien hybrid woman called Miranda, who's quite a complex character. There are also a pair of a newly encountered species of intelligent corvids, or crows, ravens, some kind of enigmatic bird species that has been discovered on another terraformed planet in the novel's backstory. And they're very interesting characters. I'll talk more about the crows in a bit, but all of these individuals have profoundly different biologies and thought processes. So it's a bit of a motley crew, really. And in their jaunts around the galaxy, the Skipper crew have discovered a planet called Emir, which is one of those planets which was terraformed or partially terraformed by the ancient terraforming program that humans embarked on eons ago. So it was one of those planets which humans had designated as a possible colony, a new home for humanity, after Earth collapsed. And despite the fact that the colonists who originally settled on this planet, they came from a very technologically advanced spacefaring civilization, all that remains today on Emir is a small community in this place called Landfall, which is basically a small farming town. And the colonists here live a very rustic way of life. Their ecology is extremely fragile. Living conditions are very harsh. So this is the community that they discover, that they encounter. And the Skipper crew, they decide they want to investigate further and learn more about this world, albeit in a very discreet manner, through covert infiltration rather than a straightforward first contact. But alongside this colony, they also pick up a strange and inscrutable signal coming from the planet, some kind of radio signal that doesn't originate from the humans. It appears to be much older in origin, and it appears to be alien in origin. So whatever's going on the planet, it's not as simple as it looks. There's something complicated going on. And this is quite an intriguing mystery, but things only get stranger still. So we've got this basic storyline, this basic setup with the starship, and they're discovering this planet. But actually the bulk of the story takes place on landfall itself, in this farming town. And we follow a few key characters there. For example, there's this young girl who's born in the colony who is one of our POV characters who we keep returning to. And that the narrative is structured in such a way that it's quite unusual. It's sort of non-chronological. Events jump around in time quite a lot. There is a reason for this, but it does feel quite disjointed and confusing, and this only becomes more so as you progress through the book. Strange things start happening on the planet, and events unfold in a way that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I won't go into any detail, but I'll just say it can be quite a disorientating read. But don't expect to understand everything straight away. This is all part of the mystery, and you need to have faith that everything will be explained in due course. It's not a Murakami novel. Things will get explained. You just need to be patient. And I do think that the big reveal and the plot resolution was definitely satisfying. And it works well as a story. And I think one of the other main strengths for the book for me is the characters, right? There's so much variety of characters. And I think perhaps one of the most intriguing new characters that we get introduced is Gothy and Gethley. So this is the pair of corvids that join the skipper crew. These ravens, right? And they come to play quite an important role in the story. And it's interesting how we explore the nature of intelligence and the different forms that intelligence and sentience can take in these creatures, as opposed to some of the others that we are familiar with. So one of the things that I liked about the second book, or I found really interesting, was the concept of a decentralized intelligence that was explored in the octopuses. And I think in a similar way, this book proposes another alternative vision of intelligence in the corvid species, who only really achieve full, true intelligence when they're combined as a pair. So each aspect of the pair has a different form of intelligence. In this case, it's a male-female pair. The female, Gothy, is an expert at gathering information, while the male, Gethley, his skill is in analysing this information and using it for planning. And by themselves, these two creatures, they can't really do much. It's only when they're combined as a unit together that they can achieve their full potential. And so it's a kind of symbiotic intelligence. It's an interesting concept. And I wonder if Tchaikovsky was inspired by Norse mythology at all when he conceived of this idea. You know, with Odin and his two raven companions, Hugin and Munin, because Hugin is thought and Munin is memory. Those are the functions that they have in Norse myth. And these two birds would fly around the world collecting information for Odin, and then they would return to him and whisper their secrets in his ear. So it's a kind of, raven pair. And each individual has a different function within that pair. And Gothy and Gethley basically fulfill that same function. So yeah, it's very interesting. Once again, Tchaikovsky shines in his vision of alien biology and alien psychology. There's so many diverse forms of life and intelligence. in this story, and they have to work together, especially in the skipper crew. So a constant effort is needed for mutual understanding and respect, and it's a wonder that they do it as well as they do. It's definitely a thought-provoking story. There's some pretty deep themes. We've got a diverse array of characters, and there's a big mystery to uncover. Like I said, it can be a bit confusing at times. And just like Children of Ruin, there were times where I felt the story dragged a little. But the concepts were compelling enough that I don't think this is a major issue. In fact, I think I enjoyed this one more than Children of Ruin. But it's not in the same caliber as Children of Time. I mean, that's a masterpiece which I don't think can be beaten. But as it is, it's a very solid science fiction tale, and I'm giving it 4 stars. Right, so that completes the book review trio. I am thinking of perhaps moving away from book review trios for a little while and focusing more on standalone reviews. So I'll probably be doing a few more of those coming up. I do still have one book review trio which I'm planning to do, which will be based on the big 3, Asimov, Clarke and Heinlein. I want to put all of those together in one review. So that will be coming up at some point. At the minute, I am reading The Wind's 12 Quarters by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's a short story collection. I've been reading a few short story collections recently. I've also read this book, self-published, Dark Matter by John Chapman. It's also short stories. So those are the things that I've been reading most recently. I think for my next book, I'm going to pick a random one from the BookSpinner. Let's see what we can get. Okay, 84 books on the BookSpinner. A lot of potential here. Let's see what comes up. Resilient. Resilient by Alan Stroud. This is the second book in the Fractal series. I read the first book, Fearless, quite recently. In fact, that one also came up in the BookSpinner. I definitely enjoyed that, so I expect to enjoy this too. This one was signed by the author when I met him last year. Let's have a quick look at the blurb. AD 2118, Earth. The world is about to change as a terrorist strike obliterates the planet's biggest solar farm, altering the global economic balance. AD 2118, Mars. Phobos Station is ready to receive an emergency shuttle full of wounded miners. But when those miners turn out to be insurgents, Dr. Emerson Drake realizes he is trapped and he has to fight to survive. AD 2118, Deep Space. Captain Alyssa Shan must come to terms with her guilt after the loss of her ship. What remains of her crew cannot manage without her, and they need to choose whether to try to get home on a captured ship or stay to observe the strange anomaly that swallowed their vessel. 3 situations, 1 resolution. Humanity's future is on the line. What can save us? Okay. I'm really looking forward to that. So I won't wait for another book review trio for this one. Once I've read this one, I'll let you know. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.